Why did Saul kill the priests at Nob? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Samuel on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 6 to 23. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 6. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Samuel chapter 22, beginning at verse 6. When Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered, now Saul was staying in Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in Ramah, with his spear in his hand and all his servants standing about him. Then Saul said to his servants who stood about him, "Hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? All of you have conspired against me, and there is no one who reveals to me that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse. And there is not one of you who is sorry for me or reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as it is this day." Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul, and said, "I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." So the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were in Nob. And they all came to the king. And Saul said, "Hear now, son of Ahitub." He answered, "Here I am, my lord." Then Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me, to lie in wait, as it is this day?" So Ahimelech answered the king and said, "And who among all your servants is as faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, who goes at your bidding, and is honorable in your house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant, or to any in the house of my father, for your servant knew nothing of all this, little or much." And the king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." And the king said to the guards who stood about him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled, and did not tell it to me." But the servants of the king would not lift their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, "You turn and kill the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priests, and killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. Also Nob, the city of the priests, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and nursing infants, oxen and donkeys and sheep, with the edge of the sword. Now one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priests. So David said to Abiathar, "I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul. I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not fear, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, but with me you shall be safe." David is on the run from Saul. He first went to the Philistines, but had to flee from there. Then he came to Moab, accompanied by about 400 people at that time, but was told by God not to remain there, but to return to Judah. So David left his father and mother in Moab and did as God commanded. Sometime while all of this was going on, word gets back to Saul at Gibeah that David and his men had been found. Hearing this news causes Saul, when gathered among his servants, to complain about their loyalties, for David's whereabouts had been unknown to him for quite some time. He complains that none of them had told him about the covenant that David and Jonathan had made, a conspiracy in Saul's eyes to bring David to the throne after killing him. He asked his servants if it was David who could give them fields and vineyards, or who could make them captains in the army. This, of course, was a rhetorical question, for at that time David could not do those things. But Saul feared that they desired to have David be that man by replacing him. That Saul is only surrounded by Benjamites here shows the state of Saul's kingdom at that time. Sure, Israel wasn't divided at the point of civil war, but they weren't the united kingdom they should have been under a strong king. For almost 400 years by this point, Israel was a collection of tribes loosely held together by a common ancestor, Abraham. They had been ruled by God under judges, and now an earthly king. But it wouldn't be until David that this nation would truly unite together as one. Under Saul, they would for a time, but then seemingly revert back to tribalism because of Saul's weak leadership. This state of Israel was why God wanted David to return to Judah, even while on the run, for the nation needed to be united under their king, and the only way David could be that king was if he was seen as being among them, not coming from a foreign nation to rule them. This complaint by Saul about a lack of loyalty caused Doeg the Edomite to speak up. He said that when he was in Nob, David came to the high priest Ahimelech. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for David, gave David bread and the sword of Goliath, and sent him on his way. Nob wasn't far from Gibeah, we think, and so if Ahimelech had told Saul of David's visit, perhaps David could have been caught sooner. Thus Saul's anger was aroused against Ahimelech. I find it interesting that Saul wasn't angry with Doeg for keeping that information until now, but I guess better late than never, right? Saul called Ahimelech and all the priests at Nob before him to answer this accusation. Ahimelech told Saul that he genuinely didn't know that David was on the run from the king. David had been a faithful servant and son-in-law of the king, and so he thought nothing of inquiring of the Lord for David, for Ahimelech had probably inquired of the Lord for David numerous times. In all this, Ahimelech is pleading ignorance of the situation, which he truly was, and he is also pleading that he shouldn't have even been suspicious of David's actions based on David's reputation with Saul. This last part is important, for sometimes we desire to remain ignorant willfully so we don't have to lie, when really we should have known that something was up. Other times we are ignorant with no clue about our ignorance until someone reveals it to us. The latter case should have caused Saul to forgive Ahimelech and the priests for unwittingly betraying him in his eyes, for they genuinely had no idea that David was Saul's enemy. But alas, Saul was too far gone. He couldn't be reasoned with. His paranoia about David and unbridled rage could not be abated, and so he charged Ahimelech and the priests with treason, and ordered his servants to kill the priests. To their credit, Saul's servants would not kill the priests of God, holy men of God, for doing nothing wrong, showing us that even though Saul was a wicked man, that didn't mean his servants were. Doeg the Edomite had no such scruples, and so he killed not only Ahimelech, but all the priests of Nob, 85 men at that time. Only Abiathar, one of Ahimelech's sons, escaped. But if this murder wasn't bad enough, Saul had the people of Nob, both men and women and children, killed. This act was not an act of justice being done on the order of God. It was a murderous act of a tyrant who couldn't understand that he himself was the reason that God had left him and giving his kingdom to another. Saul was to blame, and Saul alone. Having escaped, though, Abiathar comes to David and tells him of the situation. David laments of having put the priests in that situation, for he knew in his heart that Doeg, seeing the events, would bring them trouble. But there was nothing he could do about that now, except protect Abiathar from Saul, something that David was determined to do by telling Abiathar to remain with him. Abiathar is going to play an important role during the reign of David, so please make note of this name in your Bibles, for we will come across it many times in our future studies. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 1 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.